caped crusader, the Dark Knight, the defender of Gotham, Batman. Today on the Fandom Show, we're looking at one of the most legendary and popular superheroes of all time. So join us, will you now, as we look into the history of how a rather unusual comic book character became a pop culture icon. Believe it or not, Batman is almost 80 years old. His origins go back to 1939 and a young comic book artist named Bob Kane. Kane worked for the National Comics Publications Company, which was the forerunner to today's DC Comics. Following the popularity of Superman, National Comics tasked Bob Kane with developing more superheroes. After a few false starts, he hit on a concept that he thought could be a winner, a character he called the Batman. Kane's initial concept drawings were vastly different from the character that we know and love today. The drawings featured a character in a red outfit, no cowl, and instead of a cape, actual wings. The Batman character in its current form actually owes its existence to a collaborator of Bob Kane's named Bill Finger. Finger made several critical suggestions off of Kane's concept drawings, among them that the character have a full cowl on its head, that the outfit be all black and not red, and that instead of wings, that the character would have a cape. Finger also suggested the name Bruce Wayne for Batman's alter ego. Despite his immense contributions to the character, due to comic industry politics, Finger was never properly credited as Batman co-creator until 2015, more than 40 years after his death. Batman was also one of the first superheroes to have a teaser campaign, with a small blurb in an issue of Detective Comics highlighting Batman's debut in a coming issue. Finally, it had all come together, and officially, in Detective Comics issue number 27, the world was introduced to Batman. Well, the initial response was underwhelming. It wasn't long until Batman started to build an audience and become a mainstay of comic book shelves everywhere. Of course, you can't have an iconic superhero without some iconic supervillains, and most of Batman's most famous rivals have been around for about as long as he has. The Joker debuted in 1940, the Penguin and the Scarecrow in 1941, and the Riddler in 1948. Of course, not all Batman villains are old-timers. The character Bane, who played a major role in the Dark Knight Rises film a few years back, has actually only been part of the Batman canon since 1993. Batman is somewhat unique because he has several qualities that are more in line with a supervillain than a superhero. He comes from a broken family. He wears mostly dark colors. He lives in an underground lair of sorts, and he mainly works at night. Another thing that sets Batman apart from other heroes is that he doesn't actually have any superpowers. He's just a very smart, very skilled human being with a lot of money and a lot of technology. The original Batman series was somewhat darker than most other comics on the market at the time. They described Bruce Wayne's origin and his background, his skills as a crime fighter and as a detective as he worked tirelessly to defend Gotham from evil. The stories proved popular. In fact, during a downturn in the comics industry in the 1950s, Batman was one of the few series that was relatively unaffected. In the mid-60s, everything about the franchise changed when Batman went camp. From 1966 to 1969, Adam West starred as Batman and Burt Ward as Robin in a zany action series that favored action and goofy characters over the more serious tone of the comics. While some Batman fans view the series negatively, it did take the franchise to new heights of popularity and produced the first ever Batman motion picture. From the early 1970s to the mid-1980s, Batman went back to the comic books, and the series returned to the darker, more mature tone for which it has always been known. While still a successful and proven pop culture property, everything would change in 1989 when Tim Burton and Michael Keaton took Batman to the big time. Well, the casting of Michael Keaton was and still is highly controversial among Batman fans. An excellent performance by Jack Nicholson as the Joker, along with tight direction by Tim Burton, led the movie to become a smash hit. In addition to its box office success, the movie also made a ton of money from licensing deals for items like clothing, accessories, restaurant time promotions, toys, and video games. Tim Burton's Batman would go on to make over $400 million and become the highest-grossing film of 1989. It remains to this day one of the most successful superhero movies of all time. A sequel would follow in 1992's Batman Returns, also directed by Tim Burton and starring Michael Keaton. While not as successful as the first movie, Batman Returns is nevertheless considered a solid entry in the franchise. Bob Kane died on November 3, 1998 at the age of 83, having lived long enough to see the intriguing character he created become a global phenomenon multiple times over. And that concludes the first half of our look at Batman. For our next episode, we're going to pick it up with a more in-depth look at Batman Returns, as well as looking at the Dark Knight's fall from grace in the late 1990s and his return to pop culture dominance in the early 2000s. We'll also be taking a more in-depth look at some of the more unusual Batman video games and merchandise that's out there. That's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks for watching.